This November 19th, America will note, and hopefully it will long remember, what Mr. Lincoln said at the Gettysburg dedication of a national cemetery. You know the words. This nation was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And at the close of his address, after paying homage to the men who died there, he said they died to bring about a new birth of freedom. This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. If that new birth of freedom occurred, if America kept the promise that Lincoln made, it did so in several steps. First, the Emancipation Proclamation. Second, the 13th Amendment. Third, the 14th Amendment. Next, the 15th Amendment. And then, belatedly, judicial enforcement of the Reconstruction Civil War amendments, which gave legal form to the concepts of equality and liberty for which many Union soldiers died. It is fashionable now to downplay the role of Lincoln, even to downplay the role of the Union Army, and to speak about the social movements. And I do not want to deprecate the role of the people in bringing about these events. But I do want to speak here for a more traditional point of view. In 2005, a young senator who would later go out of his way to compare himself in every way possible to Lincoln, Senator Barack Obama of Illinois, wrote, "I cannot swallow whole the view of Lincoln as the great emancipator. As a law professor and civil rights lawyer, and as an African American, I'm fully aware of his limited views on race. Anyone who reads the Emancipation Proclamation knows it was more a military document than a clarion call for justice." I fully anticipate that President Obama might have a little more appreciation for the dilemmas of being a president and the challenges Lincoln faced, and he might swallow whole the idea that Abraham Lincoln deserves in every meaningful way his reputation as the great emancipator. But Senator Obama was right. It's a more complicated story. And in a few minutes, I hope to introduce you to the complications. The basic idea is that Lincoln was a reluctant emancipator, that slaves forced the issue onto the national agenda by escaping and crossing into Union hands. At the Emancipation Proclamation technically freed no slaves, and the proclamation was at best a first step. It did not even emancipate slaves in territory controlled by the Union, and all these things are true. In truth, emancipation was a process, not a moment, and proclamation is only a step. Now, was Lincoln reluctant? The evidence usually cited for that is his reversal of John C. Fremont's Emancipation Order in 1861. My view is Lincoln was a lawyer, not a racist. And Abraham Lincoln knew, because he was a lawyer, a great lawyer, the best practicing lawyer in the history of the country who would become president. There is no better lawyer who ever became president. He understood that the president lacks constitutional authority to do justice in the abstract. Now, when he said that he lacked power, people can say he's reluctant. But what he's really saying is he would act for justice if he had the power, if he had the authority under the statutes or the authority under the Constitution. He responded to his friend Senator Browning of Illinois, who held the Senate seat he had campaigned for a few years earlier, and expressed amazement that Browning was upset with him. And he made several points that were basic to the knowledge of any lawyer in 1861. First, Fremont's Emancipation Order violated federal statutes. It was inconsistent with existing law. Second, Fremont did not simply confiscate slaves to use them as labor for military effort. He declared them forever free. There is idealism in that, but no general in the field has power to do that. And Lincoln did not believe at that point in time that he had power to do that. Yes, a general, if he needs them, can seize them and assign them work. But when the need is past, it is not for the general to fix their permanent legal status. Lincoln, the lawyer, was speaking the truth. Lincoln, the strategist, also knew that the border states were at stake. If Fremont's order had been upheld, in his words, Kentucky would be turned against us. I think to lose Kentucky is nearly the same as to lose the whole game. Kentucky gone, we could not hold Missouri, nor, I think, Maryland. A group of ministers came to Mr. Lincoln and said, "Are you on God's side? And is he on ours?" And he said, "Well, I'm not sure whether God is on our side. I'm not sure I need God's support as much as I need Kentucky's." When thinking about constitutional power, you should think about means and ends. There's a wonderful scene in Spielberg's movie, Lincoln, which beautifully captures and summarizes about 3 class presentations I give in my class on Lincoln. And it does so accurately, eloquently, specifically. I can think of nothing better than to consult that. Wish I could here. But he tells his cabinet that emancipation is a means to winning the war. But he has problems. In his view, the South is still part of the country. Southerners are still citizens. Southerners have due process rights. Southerners have property rights, even though he doesn't believe slaves are property. He has to remember that he's arguing that state laws are still fully in force. And so, anything he does has to be explained and understood as a military measure. Not because he's a reluctant emancipator, as Senator Obama implied, but because the Constitution imposes that rigid limitation on his power as an executive. Now, Frederick Douglass had every reason to be frustrated with the man. But at this point, as he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, Frederick Douglass gives the man a break. Hope President Obama gives the man a break. Abraham Lincoln may be slow. Abraham Lincoln may desire peace, but Abraham Lincoln is not a man to reconsider, retract, and contradict words and purposes solemnly proclaimed over his official signature. Those are the words of Frederick Douglass. I offer him as a character witness on the issue of Mr. Lincoln's zeal. For the rest of his administration, after September 22, 1862, Abraham Lincoln's political efforts were dedicated to preserving the Emancipation Proclamation, against the doubts of his own party, against the doubts of the Copperheads, against the claims and arguments of people who had supported him in his own state. There's a wonderful public letter in the summer of 1863. It's not one of the better known Lincoln messages, but what he says is, look, I know you're dissatisfied with me about the Negro. I know you're dissatisfied with me about the Emancipation Proclamation. I did it to win the war, and oh, by the way, the war has been going much better since I did it. And General Grant backed him up on that point. But how did he deal with the central problem that the Fremont order gave him? What power did he have to declare that they were forever free? Lincoln thought about this and feared the spectacle of millions of slaves induced to leave their stations and to cross into Union lines at risk. He worried about the men who had picked up bayonet and fought for the Union flag. He says, look, people act on the basis of motives. You cannot expect them to work for you, to fight for you, to support your cause, unless you're willing to act for them. And so he made an argument. It's an argument we know today as basic constitutional analysis. The means further the ends. The means of emancipation were designed to make sure that slaves would commit themselves to the Union cause. And they did. Thousands of slaves crossed Union lines, and thousands of slaves joined the ranks of the Union Army, and thousands of slaves threw themselves into the most horrific, bloody battles as a result of all of this effort. Lincoln paid tribute to them in this summer 1863 letter. There'll be some black men who can remember that with silent tongue and clenched teeth and steady eye and well-poised bayonet, they've helped mankind onto this great consummation. While there'll be white ones, unable to forget that with malignant heart and deceitful speech, they strove to hinder it. Now, all was not yet achieved. Lincoln still had work to do. And that work was not complete until, one, he won re-election. The Emancipation Proclamation was the issue. And two, Grant, Sherman, and Sheridan won victories on the battlefield that convinced the country that the war was going well. And last, the story told in Spielberg's Lincoln. The 13th Amendment passed the House by only 2 votes. It did not get ratified until after Mr. Lincoln's death, but it was the first step on that new birth of freedom. Thank you all very much.
Freedom 101 is made possible by generous support from the University of Oklahoma Alumni Association. Freedom 101 is a program of the Institute for the American Constitutional Heritage at the University of Oklahoma. For more videos and podcasts, visit freedom.ou.edu.